When most people see weeds in their garden, their first instinct is to grab a hoe, gloves, or spray bottle and attack. I used to be the same way, dedicated to keeping every inch of my garden perfectly tidy and weed-free. But one year, out of pure exhaustion and curiosity, I decided to leave a small patch of my garden untouched. No weeding, no tilling, just observation. And what happened next completely changed how I see gardening and weeds. It started as a mistake. I got busy. I had intended to come back and clean up that section, but the days turned into weeks. Soon a mix of so-called weeds had taken over: dandelion, clover, plantain, chickweed, and even some wild grasses. At first glance, it looked messy, maybe even neglected. But when I got closer, I noticed something astonishing. The soil beneath that patch was moist, dark, and crumbly, while the rest of my garden was dry and cracking in the summer heat. Intrigued, I did some digging, literally and figuratively. I found earthworms, more than I'd seen in any other area of my garden. I spotted pollinators, ladybugs, and even a tiny toad taking refuge in the cool undergrowth. I started learning that some of these weeds were actually improving the soil. For example, clover fixes nitrogen from the air into the soil. Dandelions, with their deep taproots, pull up minerals from deep below, making them available to other plants when the leaves break down. What I had created, entirely by accident, was a living mulch and microhabitat. This small weed-laden patch was reducing soil erosion, preserving moisture, and supporting biodiversity. And all I had done was nothing. You know, the idea that weeds are always bad is actually more of a cultural mindset than a biological fact. Of course, not all weeds are welcome. Some are invasive or they crowd out food crops. But honestly, many of them are simply pioneer plants, nature's way of healing and protecting bare soil. In permaculture, this is known as succession. When bare soil is left alone, nature immediately begins covering it with whatever plant life is available, often called weeds. These plants are stabilizers, moisture holders, and nutrient miners. Leaving that patch alone also gave me another surprising benefit: a mental shift. I began to garden more in partnership with nature, rather than trying to dominate it. My garden felt more alive, more balanced, and yes, even more beautiful. There's something truly magical about seeing a mix of wild and cultivated plants thriving together. From that one experiment, I learned a few key takeaways. First, not all weeds are bad. Some have deep roots that aerate compacted soil, bring up nutrients, and even suppress other, more problematic weeds. Second, wild patches attract helpers, pollinators, predatory insects like ladybirds, and even birds are drawn to these diverse areas. You know, weeds can actually act as green manure. If you cut them back before they go to seed, many weeds can be used as compostable biomass, feeding your garden soil when they're returned as mulch. And well, diversity really is soil insurance. Having a mix of root depths, leaf structures, and plant families helps protect your garden from disease, compaction, and nutrient imbalances. Of course, this doesn't mean we should abandon our gardens to chaos, but it does mean we can be more selective and intentional, you know? I now purposefully allow patches of certain weeds to grow alongside my vegetables. I seed in beneficial self-seeding herbs and cover crops like buckwheat and vetch. I use chop and drop techniques where I trim plants like comfrey and let them break down in place. So, what started as laziness, or perhaps divine timing, turned into one of the most eye-opening lessons of my gardening life. Nature isn't messy, she's layered, intentional, and smarter than we give her credit for. If you're struggling with soil that's dry, compacted, or lifeless, consider letting a small patch grow wild for a while. Observe. Take notes. Dig your fingers into the soil after a few weeks. You might just be amazed by what nature does when you stop interfering. Sometimes the best gardening strategy is to simply step back.